What if your biggest heartbreak wasn't the end of your story, but the beginning of something sacred? Could your struggles be the very tools shaping your deepest calling? When life breaks you, what if it's actually God breaking ground to plant purpose? Pain doesn't come with a manual. It comes like a storm, sudden, chaotic, and often without warning. It interrupts our plans, shakes our confidence, and makes us question everything we thought we knew about ourselves and about God. In those moments, it's natural to ask, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? Or even more quietly, God, where are you? But what if we've been asking the wrong questions? What if pain isn't just something to survive, but something that's shaping us? What if the very thing you're desperate to avoid is the very place your purpose is being born? The truth is, we all experience pain. No one escapes it. It's part of being human. But there's a difference between pain that breaks you and pain that builds you. And the difference isn't the pain itself, it's what you do with it. God doesn't waste pain. In fact, pain might be his most powerful tool. Think about it. Some of the most influential, purpose-driven lives in history didn't start in triumph. They started in tragedy. The stories we admire most, the people we look up to, they didn't become who they are because life was easy. They became who they are because they let God meet them in the middle of their struggle and shape something greater out of it. It's in those breaking moments that we find a deeper truth. Your greatest sorrow may carry the seeds of your greatest calling. Let's look at a few people we've heard about, people whose pain became their platform. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers and left to rot in prison before he rose to power and saved an entire nation. Moses spent decades in isolation before stepping into his destiny as a leader. Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, was struck blind and humbled before he began preaching truth that would change the world. Even Jesus, yes, even the Son of God, fulfilled his purpose through unimaginable suffering on the cross. Each of their stories tells us something powerful. Pain doesn't mean God is absent. Often it means he's up to something more than we can understand. But when you're in the thick of it, when life hurts, when betrayal cuts deep, when illness lingers, when dreams die, it's hard to believe that anything good could come from it. It feels like survival. It feels like holding your breath through the storm, hoping to make it out alive. And yet it's in that very storm that God often does his deepest work. Not in the comfort zones, not in the highlight reels, but in the raw, messy middle of pain. Pain reveals. It strips away our false selves. It shows us where we've placed our trust. It uncovers the things we've buried deep because we didn't want to deal with them. And most importantly, pain creates space. Space for God to move, space for healing to happen, space for purpose to rise from the ashes. When everything is comfortable, we rarely grow. But in pain, we get desperate, we get real. And that's when we become open to something greater than ourselves. Pain humbles us. It teaches us dependence, it teaches us compassion. It helps us stop judging others and start loving more deeply. Because once you've been through it, once you've sat in the dark, you become more sensitive to the pain in others. This is how pain becomes purpose. When your wounds become the very place you offer healing to someone else. Your story, yes, your real, unedited story, could be the exact message someone else needs to hear. Not because it's perfect, but because it's true. Not because it's polished, but because it's honest. And when you share from that place, not the mountaintop, but the valley, you give others permission to hope. You let them know that they're not alone. You become a light in their darkness. That's what it means to find purpose in pain. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean skipping the grief or the questions or the nights you cried yourself to sleep. It means trusting that God can take even this, your heartbreak, your failure, your fear, and use it to do something that matters. You might be thinking, that sounds nice, but you don't know my story. And you're right, I don't. But I do know this, God does. He sees it all. And he's not just watching from a distance. He's working, right in the middle of it. And no matter how far gone you feel, no matter how broken, no matter how many wrong turns you've taken, it's not too late. Not too late to be healed. Not too late to be used. Not too late to start again. Because purpose isn't about having a perfect story. It's about what you do with the story you have. The struggle you went through, it didn't disqualify you. It actually qualified you. It gave you wisdom. It gave you a voice. It gave you insight that only comes from experience. And that's exactly what the world needs. People who've walked through the fire and come out not untouched, but transformed. People who aren't afraid to show their scars because they know those scars carry power. People like you. Because once you've lived through pain, your words carry weight. You're no longer just speaking from theory, you're speaking from survival. And that survival turns into service. It becomes a mission, not born out of ambition, but out of empathy. Empathy is a rare gift in a world obsessed with performance. But when you've suffered, you begin to see differently. You notice pain in people's eyes. You sense the silence behind someone's smile. You pay attention to what's not being said. Why? Because you've been there. And being there has made you sensitive. Not soft, not weak, sensitive in the most sacred way. That sensitivity allows you to serve with depth, and that depth can't be manufactured. It has to be lived. You might not realize it now, but every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every moment of despair, it's all shaping you. Not to make you bitter, but to make you better. Not to shrink your life, but to deepen it. To prepare you for impact. Because you can't lead people to healing unless you've walked the path yourself. You can't guide someone out of darkness unless you've held a candle there too. And guess what? The world doesn't need another flawless leader. It needs someone willing to go first. Someone brave enough to say, here's what I've been through, and here's how I'm still here. That's what transforms people. That's what inspires healing. There's a power in your honesty that perfection can never match. And that power is multiplied every time you stop hiding and start sharing. Because your pain, surrendered to God, becomes someone else's breakthrough. Think about that. What if the very thing you're ashamed of, your breakdown, your failure, your trauma, wasn't meant to disqualify you, but to connect you? What if someone is waiting on the other side of your courage? Someone who needs to hear how you got through it. Someone who's searching for proof that healing is possible. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing. Willing to be seen. Willing to be used. Willing to trust that God can take your broken pieces and create something more beautiful than you ever imagined. That's the paradox of purpose. It doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it looks like quiet resilience. Sometimes it looks like forgiving someone who will never apologize. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed when everything in you says to stay down. But each of those moments, each brave, messy, painful moment is purpose in motion. So many people think purpose is some big, distant destination, a platform, a title, a calling that comes with clarity and applause. But more often, it's born in the shadows, in the unnoticed faithfulness, in the hard yes when nobody's watching. And here's the truth. You don't have to wait to arrive somewhere to start living with purpose. You're already in it. Every moment you choose healing over hiding, every time you decide to keep going instead of giving up, every conversation where you speak hope instead of hate, that's purpose, that's calling. You see, your pain wasn't random. It was a seed. And seeds don't grow in the light. They grow in the dark. But they grow, quietly, steadily, until one day you realize what once buried you has now become the ground that's producing fruit. You become someone who leads not because you were born with all the answers, but because you were willing to wrestle with the hard ones. Someone who walks with others, not from above, but alongside, because you know what it's like to stumble, to question, to cry in the dark. And that kind of leadership, it changes lives. This is the moment to stop waiting for permission and start living from the truth. Your pain has purpose. And no, this doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. Healing doesn't mean immunity, but it does mean redemption. It means that nothing you've been through will be wasted. Not your disappointment, not your betrayal, not your diagnosis, not your divorce. All of it, every shattered piece, is raw material in the hands of a God who creates beauty from ashes. That's why you don't have to run from your past. You can redeem it, you can reframe it, you can use it, and in doing so, you give others the courage to do the same. There's someone out there who feels like their story is over, someone who's convinced that what they've been through is too much to recover from, but then they hear you, and something shifts, hope flickers. Because your story, your scars, your honesty, it breaks the silence. This is how movements start, not with perfect people, but with real people. People who've decided that pain won't be their prison, it will be their platform. You might be thinking, I'm not strong enough. But maybe strength isn't the goal. Maybe surrender is. Maybe it's less about proving you've got it all together and more about trusting the one who holds it all. Because when you give God your weakness, He gives you strength. When you offer Him your past, He writes a new future. When you surrender your pain, He hands you purpose. And the most incredible part? He doesn't just heal you, He multiplies the healing. Your life becomes a ripple effect. Your courage becomes contagious. Your faith becomes fuel for others still stuck in fear. You don't need a stage to be impactful. You just need to be real. So if you're still in the middle of the mess, take heart. You are not alone. You are not forgotten, and you are not finished. God is still writing, and the chapters ahead are filled with redemption. Because every chapter, especially the painful ones, has purpose. Even the moments you wanted to erase, even the parts you thought disqualified you, even the silence, the setbacks, the seasons that felt like failure. They weren't wasted, they were forming something deeper in you. You may not have seen it then, you may not see it now, but something was growing underground. And growth isn't always visible. Sometimes it happens slowly, quietly, hidden beneath layers of hurt and healing. But make no mistake, it's happening. God is not only the author of your story, He's the editor, the healer, the one who turns what was meant for evil into a foundation for good. And in that process, He invites you to participate, not by performing, not by pretending, but by showing up with all your questions, your fears, your scars, and saying, here I am. That's where transformation begins. When you stop trying to fix yourself and start surrendering yourself. When you stop hiding your wounds and begin honoring them. Because your wounds don't make you weak, they make you relatable. And people are starving for something real. They don't need more curated content. They need connection. They need someone who says, me too. Someone who understands, someone who's lived it. This is how your pain becomes your power. Not through control, but through compassion. Not through perfection, but through presence. You become the kind of person who sees what others miss. The kind of person who recognizes silent battles. The kind of person who walks slowly, listens deeply, and loves fiercely. And all of that came from the very thing you thought would break you. Isn't that wild? The enemy wants your pain to isolate you, but God wants it to prepare you. The enemy wants it to silence you, but God wants it to give you a voice. The enemy wants it to define you by shame, but God wants it to redefine you with grace. That's the beauty of divine redemption. It doesn't erase your story, it reframes it. It takes the broken places and turns them into testimonies. It takes what hurt you and makes it holy. And when you begin to walk in that truth, something shifts. You no longer run from your past, you redeem it. You don't disqualify your scars, you display them as proof of survival. Your life becomes a living, breathing message of hope. That's why this matters so much, because there's someone else on the edge, someone who's drowning in questions, lost in their own pain, desperate for direction. And your story, your journey, is exactly what they need to hear. Not some polished version, not a highlight reel, but the real, raw, redeemed story of how you found light in the dark. That's how purpose spreads. That's how healing multiplies. Not in stages, but in honest conversations. Not in fame, but in faithfulness. You don't have to fix everything to be used. You don't have to be fully healed to help. You just have to say yes. Yes to showing up. Yes to sharing your story. Yes to believing that what God has done in you, He can do through you. And every time you do, the enemy loses a little more power. Shame shrinks, fear fades, hope rises. Because when you live with purpose, even your pain starts to make sense. It doesn't mean you'll never grieve. It doesn't mean you'll never hurt again. But it does mean that none of it will be wasted. You'll begin to see your life through a different lens. What once felt like punishment now feels like preparation. What once felt like the end now feels like a new beginning. You realize that God didn't let you fall to destroy you. He let you fall so He could rebuild you. Stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more aligned with who you were always meant to be. And here's the amazing thing. Once you've been through the fire, you stop fearing the flames. You've already survived the worst. You've already walked through the valley. And now you carry something unshakable. It's not confidence in yourself. It's confidence in the one who carried you. You begin to lead with humility, love with authenticity, live with intentionality, and the people around you feel it. They notice, they lean in, because there's something different about someone who has walked through the fire and still loves deeply. Something powerful about someone who has every reason to be bitter, but chooses to bless. That's real impact, and that's what you were made for. So don't minimize your story. Don't downplay your pain. Don't let the past convince you that you're disqualified. You're more ready than you know. Not because you've mastered everything, but because you've been transformed by it. And transformation, that's the foundation of every great calling. Keep walking, keep trusting, keep surrendering, because the best chapters are still being written. And as those chapters unfold, you'll begin to see a pattern. God doesn't just restore, He repurposes. He doesn't just heal what was broken, He builds something stronger with it. That betrayal, it's equipping you to recognize loyalty. That failure, it's sharpening your discernment. That heartache, it's deepening your compassion. This isn't random, it's refinement. You are being shaped into someone who doesn't just survive storms, but leads others through them. Someone who knows how to anchor others because you've found your own anchor in the chaos. And the beauty is, you don't have to try and be anyone else. Your pain has already carved out a unique space for your voice, your gifts, your purpose. You don't need a pulpit to preach. Your life is the message. Every time you choose healing instead of hate, faith instead of fear, grace instead of bitterness, you're speaking louder than words ever could. And people notice. They're drawn to that authenticity. Because in a world of filters and facades, real stands out. Real resonates. Real is rare. So what if your vulnerability is actually your greatest strength? What if the very thing you've been hiding is what God wants to highlight? Not to embarrass you, but to empower others. Not to spotlight your pain, but to showcase His power. Because when God moves in your life, He doesn't just do it for you. He does it through you, for others. You become a bridge, a living testimony, a walking answer to someone else's desperate prayer. That's the ripple effect of purpose. It starts with one life, fully surrendered, fully honest, fully available, and it spreads. You may never know the full extent of your impact. You might not see every life touched, every heart healed, every mind shifted. But make no mistake, it's happening. Because light doesn't need to announce itself, it just shines. And when you let your light shine through the cracks of your story, you become unstoppable. Not perfect, not immune, but purposeful. An agent of healing, of hope, of holy disruption in a broken world. And none of it was wasted. Not the nights you cried yourself to sleep. Not the moments you felt like giving up. Not the seasons you thought you'd never survive. They all matter. They all count. They all shaped you for this. That's why you can walk into the future without fear. Because you're not walking alone. You've been guided, prepared, refined. And what once felt like punishment has now become your platform. So keep telling your story. Keep showing up with your scars. Keep believing that your brokenness doesn't disqualify you. It defines your mission. This is the truth so many need to hear. That pain can produce purpose. That heartbreak can lead to healing. That what was meant to silence you can become the very sound that sets others free. You're not here by accident. Your voice matters. Your journey matters. Your healing matters. Because someone is waiting. Waiting for the moment you decide to step forward and say, this is what I've been through, and this is what God is doing with it. And in that moment, the atmosphere shifts. The silence breaks. The healing begins. Don't wait for it all to make sense. Don't wait until you feel ready. God does His best work in the not yet, in the in-between, in the place where you're still figuring it out but still showing up. That's where transformation lives. And the truth is, you'll never be fully ready, because purpose isn't about being prepared, it's about being present. So show up anyway, lead anyway, speak anyway, live anyway. Let your life be a living example of what grace can do with a surrendered soul. That's where real power flows. Not from effort, but from encounter. Not from striving, but from surrender. And when you live that way, you stop waiting for your life to begin. You realize it's already happening. This is it, this moment, this breath, this step. It's all part of your calling. Not someday, now. Right here in the middle of the mystery. In the middle of the mess. In the middle of the miracle you can't quite see yet. Because purpose doesn't wait for clarity, it responds to obedience. So take the next step. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Because your story is sacred, your pain is powerful, and your purpose is already unfolding. Every step you take, even the hesitant ones, is movement toward purpose. You may not feel it, but you're shifting the atmosphere around you. You're leaving behind the mindset of victimhood and stepping into the identity of a vessel, one who carries hope, healing, and truth. And vessels? They don't have to be flawless. They just have to be open. Cracks don't disqualify a vessel. In fact, it's through the cracks that the light shines brightest. It's through the imperfections that others see the authenticity of your transformation. And what once made you feel broken now makes you approachable, relatable, and real. This is what the world is desperate for. Real people. Not people with rehearsed answers or perfect theology, but people who've lived through the fire and still speak of grace. People who aren't afraid to say, "I'm still healing," and still believe that healing is holy. Because healing is never a straight line. Some days it feels like progress, other days it feels like starting over. But every time you get back up, you testify to something greater than your pain. You testify to the one who holds you through it. You see, God isn't looking for perfect stories. He's writing redemptive ones. And redemption is powerful. It says, "I've been there, and I'm not ashamed of it." It says, "This hurt me, but it didn't end me." It says, "God used this mess to do something miraculous." And that's a message the world needs to hear. Because for every person who's been healed, there are 10 more who are still hurting, still hiding, still hoping someone will say the words they've been too afraid to voice. You're not alone. You're not broken beyond repair. You are not forgotten. That's where your story comes in. Not as a monument to pain, but as a map to purpose. Your journey becomes the road sign pointing others toward their healing. Your voice becomes the melody of freedom in someone else's silence. Your scars become sacred evidence of a God who redeems every piece of our lives. But here's something you need to know. Purpose doesn't protect you from future pain. It doesn't exempt you from struggle. In fact, stepping into your calling often means revisiting the very places that once wounded you, not to relive the pain, but to reclaim the ground, and that takes courage. Because going back to the broken places means choosing to see them differently, to no longer view them through the lens of shame or defeat, but through the eyes of redemption. You go back not as a victim, but as a witness of what God has done, a witness of what He's still doing, a witness that hope isn't just possible, it's real. And in doing that, you light a path for others to follow. You become a safe space for someone who doesn't yet believe that healing is possible. You become the living, breathing proof that restoration isn't a myth, it's a miracle available to anyone willing to surrender. This is what legacy looks like. It's not built in grand gestures or viral moments. It's built in the quiet courage to show up over and over again, to tell your truth, to stay faithful, to keep trusting even when it hurts. Legacy is what you leave behind when you choose purpose over pride, healing over hiding, vulnerability over vanity. And the truth is, it's already happening. You're shaping hearts, shifting atmospheres, planting seeds with every honest moment you choose to share. Even if you never see the full harvest, even if your impact never trends or gets noticed, even if it feels small, purpose isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper that echoes into eternity. So if you're still doubting whether your story matters, let this be your confirmation. It does. Every broken piece, every tear, every hard-fought victory, it all has weight. It all carries glory. It all contributes to the greater story God is writing through your life. And here's the most freeing part. You don't have to force it. You don't have to fake it. You don't have to rush the process. You just have to be available. To say, here I am, even if I'm still hurting, even if I'm still healing, even if I don't have all the answers. Because God doesn't need your perfection. He just wants your permission. Permission to enter the pain. Permission to redeem the brokenness. Permission to turn your ashes into beauty. And once you give Him that, really give it, everything begins to shift. You no longer walk in fear of being found out. You walk in confidence that you've already been found, already been loved, already been chosen. And that kind of confidence changes how you live. You become bolder, not because life is easy, but because your foundation is unshakable. You become more compassionate, not because you've avoided pain, but because you've learned how to walk through it. You become more generous with your time, your wisdom, your presence, because you know how much it means when someone shows up. That's the power of a life lived with purpose in the pain. You don't just survive, you rise. And in rising, you lift others with you. That's where your story becomes something bigger than you. Your healing becomes hope. Your process becomes purpose. Your survival becomes someone else's spark to keep going. This is what happens when we stop trying to curate a perfect life and start offering a surrendered one. The kind of life that isn't afraid of the scars because they prove that healing is real. The kind of life that welcomes the hurting because you remember what it felt like to be left out in the cold. You now carry wisdom that isn't learned in books, it's earned through tears. You now carry presence that can sit quietly beside someone else's pain without rushing to fix it. And you now carry power, not the kind that controls, but the kind that comforts. The kind of power that says, you're safe here, you're seen here, you're not walking alone. That's the legacy of pain repurposed. And maybe that's why you went through it. Not because you deserved to suffer, but because you were meant to carry healing. Not just for yourself, but for the world around you. Every hard chapter, every heartbreak, every moment of confusion, none of it will be wasted if you allow God to write the ending. Because your ending isn't failure. It isn't shame. It isn't the memory of what you lost. It's the revelation of what you've gained. Resilience, compassion, strength, depth, and above all, purpose. When you begin to live from that space, you become unstoppable. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're living with conviction. Because you've found out what matters. Because you've tasted grace and can't help but share it. And it's in that space that true calling emerges. Not as something you chase, but as something that flows naturally from who you are becoming. You don't need a big moment to walk in your calling. You just need to keep saying yes. Yes to being honest. Yes to loving well. Yes to showing up. Yes to staying faithful when no one's watching. Because purpose isn't about applause, it's about alignment. And alignment comes when you stop striving and start surrendering. So whatever your story is, wherever you are in the journey, whatever pain you're still carrying, know this. God sees it all, and He's not wasting any of it. He's shaping it, refining it, repurposing it. That loneliness, He's turning it into empathy. That failure, He's turning it into wisdom. That grief, He's turning it into depth. That trauma, He's turning it into testimony. You may not understand the why, but you can trust the who, because the one who holds your heart also holds your future. And in His hands, nothing is ever wasted. So let go of the shame, let go of the silence, let go of the belief that your pain has no purpose, and step into the truth. You are still here for a reason. Not to hide, not to pretend, but to live fully, authentically, courageously. Your life is a lighthouse for someone else still lost at sea. Your voice is a melody for someone else stuck in silence. Your story is a spark for someone else who's lost their way. Don't underestimate the power of showing up. Don't undervalue the miracle of surviving. And don't believe the lie that your best days are behind you. Because the story isn't over. It's just getting good. You're still becoming, still healing, still walking into everything God created you to be. So keep going, keep trusting, keep shining. And as you do, you'll find that every step, every scar was leading you towards something holy. Because when you give God your pain, He gives you something back. Purpose. And that purpose, it changes everything. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey. If this message stirred something in your heart, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to Think Fresh Daily for more truth that uplifts, encourages, and transforms. There's more to your story, and we'll be right here to walk it with you, step by step, scar by scar, into everything you were always meant to be. You're not alone, you're not forgotten, you're not finished. This is only the beginning. Keep walking, keep healing, keep becoming, because your purpose is waiting. And here at Think Fresh Daily, we're walking with you every step of the way.